Thank you, Sir David, and I refer to the declarations I've made in relation to the COVID recovery group. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed or numbered. My life is my own. I quote, of course, from the popular drama in 1967, The Prisoner. It seems to me that nothing has changed in relation to some people's desire to treat us as commodities to be managed by the state, and yet what has changed is the availability of technology to make it so. I'm very grateful to my constituents who've written to me about this matter, and I just would point out we've had a prior debate on this subject, or at least in which I raised this subject, and I thought that my honourable friend, the Minister for Vaccines, had ruled out vaccine passports, and I'm very grateful, therefore, to have this opportunity to hear from the Minister at this stage in the review through this petition, and I'm grateful to the petitioners. I also want to say thank you to Big Brother Watch, who provided a very helpful brief with 9 reasons why COVID passes must be stopped, and I would like to just briefly race through as many as I can squeeze in. First, that they will be unnecessary. The availability of effective vaccines, and indeed the government's amazing success in rolling them out, means that those most vulnerable to COVID-19, and soon anyone who wants and is medical eligible for a vaccine, will have a high level of protection from the virus. That means hospitalisations and deaths associated with COVID will drastically fall, and overbearing controls on society will not be justified. I know the government is now looking at COVID status certificates, which brings into play the issue of mass testing. Of course, the ground has been sown with salt on the issue of false positives, I'm sorry to say, often by some apparently eminent people who lamentably neglected the practical evidence from hospitals of real people with real disease. So I hesitate to bring up the issue of false positives, but it has to be said, as we reach an era of low prevalence of the disease, if we carry out mass testing on asymptomatic people, the issue of false positives will undoubtedly be relevant, and we need to hear from the Minister what she's going to do about it to make sure that people who test falsely positive with lateral flow tests, and indeed PCR, don't end up deprived of their liberty unnecessarily. And we very much need to hear from government about that. Of course, vaccine passports would be discriminatory. They would have the effect of socially and economically excluding people who had not had either a vaccine or a recent test result. It is, of course, unlawful under equality law to discriminate against people with protected characteristics, including age, disability, pregnancy, religion or belief. And I underscore belief. I shall have my vaccine when I'm offered it, but there'll be various people for various reasons who will not choose to do so. Effectively making vaccines mandatory by implication through COVID status certification, could leave us in a position where it would be counterproductive. The evidence from across Europe shows that if people feel compelled to take vaccines, it puts them off. It would implement, of course, a checkpoint society. Passes for the pub. That would be what it would mean, Sir David. If you want to have your pint, you've got to show your papers. I did not think that was a society we wished to live in. A surveillance state would be instituted. There'd be mission creep. They'd be irreversible, they'd be divisive, and of course they'd infringe on the autonomy of the individual. And I lament that I haven't got time to go through in detail each of those points, but I certainly will provide the brief to the Minister afterwards. I want to finish with another quote from The Prisoner, something which I would ask people advocating for these certification regimes to bear in mind. Number 2 says, "We can treat folly with kindness, knowing that soon his wild spirit will quieten and the foolishness will fall away to reveal a model citizen." And number 6 replies, "That day you'll never see."
Carla Lockhart.